Let me ask you something strange. Imagine you woke up tomorrow and checked your bank account, and sitting there, quietly, was $10,000. Money you saved yourself. Money nobody gave you. What's the first thing you'd feel? Most people say relief. Some say proud. A few say they'd immediately start worrying about losing it. But almost nobody says the word that people who've already done it use to describe that moment. Free. Not retire on a beach, free. Not never work again, free. Something quieter than that. Something harder to explain, but impossible to forget once you felt it. And here's the thing. $10,000 is not a life-changing amount of money on paper. You know that. It won't pay off a mortgage. It won't fund a business. In most cities, it barely covers 6 months of rent. But the people who've crossed that number will tell you that something happened when they got there. Something shifted. Not in their bank account, but in their head. In the way they made decisions. In the way the world responded to them. In the way they saw themselves. And once you understand why that shift happens, you'll never look at your savings account the same way again. If you're new here, welcome. This channel breaks down money, psychology, and wealth building in ways that actually make sense for real people. Hit subscribe and let's get into it. Here's the story most of us were handed about saving money. Earn money. Pay your bills. Save whatever's left. Repeat until you have enough. Sounds logical. Clean. Simple. The problem is that almost nobody actually feels like it's working. They save $200, then the washing machine dies. They rebuild it, then the dentist sends a bill. They start again, then Christmas hits, then a friend's wedding, then the car needs new tires. And suddenly they're back to square one, wondering why they can never seem to get ahead. So quietly, gradually, most people stop treating saving like a real priority. Not because they gave up officially. They never say the words out loud. They just shift it to the back of the list. They tell themselves they'll get serious when the promotion comes through, when the kids are older, when life gets a little less expensive. And then 5 years pass. Here's what I want to show you today. That cycle, that feeling of running and never moving, isn't a discipline problem. It isn't even always an income problem. It's a threshold problem. There's a specific number, a line in the sand. And for most people building from nothing in their 20s and 30s, that line sits around $10,000. Below that number, you are surviving. Above it, you are building. And the distance between those two states is so much larger than it looks from the outside. Let me show you what I mean with two people. Call them Ryan and Sophie. Ryan has about $300 in savings at any given moment. Sophie has $11,000. On an ordinary Wednesday morning, both of their laptops stop working. Same problem. Same repair cost. Let's say $800. For Ryan, Wednesday just became a crisis. He has to figure out if the credit card has room. He has to call his brother. He has to skip something else this month and feel the guilt of that. The laptop gets fixed, but the stress doesn't go away. It echoes forward into next month and the month after. For Sophie, it's an annoying Wednesday. She pays it, handles it, moves on. No ripple, no spiral, no interest accumulating in the background like a slow leak. Same problem, completely different life. But here's the part that most people miss entirely. It isn't just about being able to handle emergencies without flinching. The gap goes much deeper than that. Because Ryan doesn't just stress more, he also thinks differently because of that stress. There's a body of research on something called scarcity mindset. Scientists studying what financial pressure actually does to the human brain found something remarkable. When people feel like they don't have enough, money, time, resources, their cognitive capacity measurably decreases. Not because they're less intelligent, but because their brain is burning so much processing power on survival mode decisions that there's barely anything left for long-term thinking. It's like a computer running 15 programs at once. Everything slows down. Everything lags. You can't think clearly because your brain is too busy managing the emergency that might be coming. This is why people under financial pressure so often make choices that look irrational from the outside. Paying fees to cash a check instead of opening a bank account. taking on high-interest debt to solve a low-cost problem, choosing the quick fix over the smart fix because the smart fix requires patience they can't afford right now. It's not a character flaw. It's a mental bandwidth problem caused by living too close to the edge. The first $10,000 doesn't just protect you from the broken laptop. It protects your ability to think clearly about every other decision in your life. Here's the part nobody talks about, and honestly, it might be the most important part. When you cross the $10,000 mark for the first time, something shifts in how you see yourself. Not just your bank balance, you. Psychologists call it your financial identity. The internal story you carry about who you are with money. And for most people, that story gets written early and rarely gets updated. Maybe you grew up watching your parents fight about bills. Maybe you were always the person in your friend group who had to say no to things. Maybe you've told yourself, quietly, privately, that you're just not someone who's good with money. And here's where it gets interesting. That story doesn't just reflect your reality, it shapes your reality. Because your brain is constantly, automatically making decisions that are consistent with the identity you hold. If you believe you're bad with money, you unconsciously behave in ways that confirm it. You spend impulsively. You avoid checking your account. You don't negotiate. You don't invest. Not because you're trying to stay broke, but because the behavior matches the belief. Saving the first $1,000 doesn't always break that story. Even $5,000 sometimes doesn't crack it. But $10,000? For most people, $10,000 is the number where the old story starts to fall apart. Because $10,000 feels undeniably real. It's a number that has a comma in it. A number that took real time and real choices to build. A number that, when you see it sitting there, makes it genuinely difficult to keep telling yourself you're someone who can't do this. And when that story updates, even slightly, everything else starts to shift with it. You stop spending to feel better in the moment because you're not trying to patch over a feeling of financial failure anymore. You start protecting what you built because it now represents something about who you are. You start making decisions from a place of self-respect instead of scarcity. The money changed the identity, and the identity changes everything after that. Let's talk about momentum, because it explains the entire second half of what happens after you cross that line. Picture pushing a heavy crate across a warehouse floor. The hardest moment isn't halfway across. It isn't 3/4 of the way. The hardest moment is right at the start, getting it from completely still to any kind of movement at all. That first inch takes more energy than the next 50 feet. But once it's sliding, keeping it moving is almost effortless by comparison. Money works exactly the same way. Getting from 0 to 10,000 is genuinely the hardest financial stretch most people will ever go through. Not because the math is complicated, but because you're doing it without momentum, without proof that it's working, without a cushion to absorb the setbacks, and against an identity that keeps quietly whispering that you're wasting your time. But once you're there, the crate is moving. And 3 things happen that make everything that comes after dramatically easier. First, your money starts working for you. $10,000 sitting in a high-yield savings account or a simple index fund begins generating returns. Small ones at first, but real ones. And the first time you check your balance and it went up and you didn't do anything. You didn't pick up an extra shift. You didn't sell anything. You didn't hustle. Something in your brain rewires permanently. Because now you understand, not as a concept, but as a lived experience, that money can grow while you sleep. And that understanding changes how you think about every future dollar you earn. Second, your options expand. When you have nothing saved, you take what's available. The job offer that's just okay. The apartment that's fine enough. The financial product that's the only one willing to work with you. You take it because you have no leverage and no ability to wait. But with a cushion behind you, you can negotiate. You can decline. You can be patient. And in money, as in most of life, patience is a superpower that almost nobody without savings gets to use. Third, your relationship with risk completely flips. This is the counterintuitive one. Most people assume that having savings makes you more conservative, more risk-averse, more cautious. But the opposite tends to be true. When you have nothing, every risk feels existential. One wrong move and you're back to zero. or worse. So you freeze. You stay in the job you've outgrown. You skip the investment you don't fully understand. You avoid any decision that could go wrong. But when you have a real cushion, calculated risks start looking like opportunities. You can start the side project because you could survive 6 months without income if it flopped. You can negotiate the raise because you're not desperate. You can invest more aggressively because short-term market swings don't threaten your ability to eat. Having money makes you willing to do the things that create more money. That's the cycle. And it only starts once you've crossed the threshold. So what do you actually do with this? First, stop thinking of 10,000 as just a number and start treating it as a threshold. A, before, and after. A line you are specifically trying to cross. Because vague savings goals, save more, be smarter with money, build a cushion eventually, don't activate the same drive in your brain. Your brain needs a finish line. A specific target with a specific deadline creates urgency. It creates a mission. And missions get completed in ways that vague intentions never do. Second, protect the momentum once you get there. This is the part most people get wrong. They hit a savings milestone and treat it like permission to splurge. They fall back below the line. The identity reverts. The momentum dies. And starting over is almost as psychologically painful as starting for the first time. Celebrate your progress. Genuinely, you've earned it. But celebrate in a way that doesn't erase what you built. Third, understand that the strategy changes after the threshold. Getting to 10,000 requires willpower, sacrifice, and showing up consistently when it doesn't feel worth it. But growing from 10,000 to 50,000 or 100,000 isn't about more willpower. It's about systems. Automatic transfers. Index funds doing the heavy lifting. Compounding doing what compounding does when you leave it alone. You don't grind your way to real wealth. You set it up and let the momentum carry you. Here's what I want you to remember from all of this. Most people spend their entire lives chasing financial security by trying to earn more. And income matters. Genuinely, it does. But more income flowing into the same broken relationship with money just means more money disappearing faster. The people who actually feel in control of their financial lives, the ones who sleep well, who make clear-headed decisions, who don't flinch when the unexpected happens, they didn't get there by earning the right number. They got there by crossing a threshold, and then protecting it, and then letting the momentum they built do the rest. $10,000 isn't where the story ends. It's where it finally begins. The question has never been whether the math works. The math always works. The question is whether you understand what you're actually fighting for when you choose to save instead of spend.